Hey everyone, welcome to FF in the Six podcast, episode 9, the grand finale of season 1. I'm your host, Anthony Bandu, and with us is the co host, Johnny Shermer. Been ride or die since day one. It's been a fantastic year, buddy. How was your weekend?
It was good. I'm glad to see I'm most likely in the finals in all three of my leagues. So I really love to see that. How was your weekend?
Pretty good, even though I did lose and I'm in like the consolation rounds of fantasy football. It's been pretty good. I'm pretty happy with my team and where we landed, and just looking forward to next season. And since my league's a keeper league, just trying to decide who I'm going to be keeping for next year. So I'm just been enjoying watching football now, and I don't need to stress about putting up fantasy points every week now.
Yeah, it's gonna be definitely a tough decision for me as well in that league too. I know I got Russ in there. I got DK, Calvin Ridley, Austin Eckler. So yeah, it's gonna be tough for me.
Yeah, for sure. And, hopefully for everyone out there, you're in the finals, you're doing really well in fantasy, and, or if you're going to get ready for next year, we'll definitely try to help you out with that too. But for this episode, because it's our last one, we're going to switch it up a little bit than what we usually do. We're not going to do a recap of last week's. We're just going to dive right on into the starts, and we're going to go over who we thought were our MVPs for this season. It'll definitely be a good one for sure. And then we'll go into some of the stuff we're going to cover for next season. So, for the start for week 16, I'm going to say for quarterback to start Tom Brady at the Detroit Lions. Last week against the Atlanta Falcons, he was 31 of 45 for 390 passing yards, threw for 2 TDs. He had 2 rushes for -2 yards. Not really a mobile quarterback at all, but he was sacked 3 times, scored a total of 23.3 fantasy points. Tom has been excellent this whole year, and he's throwing his 32 TDs on the season. He may be 43 years old, but he could sling it as if he's 25. And going against the Lions defense, they've given up the second most passing yards per attempt with 8.1 and the fourth most passing TDs with 29. So this game kind of seems like an easy option to start Brady for your finals in fantasy. The Lions have the least QB hits in the league with 49, and they're ranked 28th in sacks with only a total of 19. So it just means Brady's going to have a lot of time to, stand in that pocket and just sling the ball out to his receivers, get those guys going. It's going to be a fun game to watch, and just seeing Tom Brady just destroy the Detroit Lions defense.
Yeah, I hope you're right with that one. I know in one of my leagues there, I do have Tom Brady. I picked him up on waivers a couple of weeks ago, and it was scary last week against Atlanta. I think he only had he had a really small amount of points. I know that probably 4 or 5 at halftime against the Falcons. So I was pretty worried, but then in that second half, he blew up like he usually does. So he did get me those 23 points, which was excellent to see. But moving on to my quarterback start of the week. If you're looking for a streamer like I am in one of my leagues, I know I got Tannehill for this week, but next week they're playing Green Bay. So I'm not too confident with that matchup. So I know this quarterback right here might be a better option, and that's going to be Jalen Hurts playing at the Dallas Cowboys. So last week at the Arizona Cardinals, went 24 for 44, throwing 338 yards, 3 passing touchdowns, had a rushing touchdown in there too. Couple of rushes, 11 in total for 63 yards. Had 3 fumbles as well and got sacked 6 times, but ended up scoring just over 43 fantasy points. So, especially in a finals week, that's something you really need. So, Jalen Hurts, he's a new rookie. Look at Justin Herbert earlier in the season. We didn't really think what he was going to do as well as he has, and he's been unbelievable. So, I think if Jalen Hurts keeps this up, he's going to obviously have that starting role next season in Philadelphia as well. But especially like I just said, next week, you want as many potential points as possible. And I think he can put up a fair amount. So he's thrown just over 505 passing yards in his 2 starts, 4 passing touchdowns, and 169 rushing yards. So Dallas, they've just gave up 33 points to a weak 49ers offense, with Nick Mullins throwing just over 200 passing yards as well as 2 passing touchdowns. So Dallas does allow around 1.3 rushing TDs per game, as well as just over 2 passing touchdowns per game, making them one of the best teams for opposing QBs to go against. So, again, if you're looking for a streamed quarterback for this week, go with Jalen Hurts.
Yeah, that's definitely a good option there to have Jalen Hurts going against the Dallas Cowboys. Yeah, and like you were saying, absolutely unreal for the past two games that he started and going into this week. It's going to be interesting to see how things go for him. And hopefully, moving forward, he's the starting quarterback because, Carson Wentz hasn't been doing too well with that offense, but Jalen Hurts has really put it together for them. So moving on to the running backs that we said to start, I'm going to roll with Kenyon Drake of the Arizona Cardinals going against the 49ers. Last week versus Philly, he was very unproductive. He had 10 rushes for 26 yards, two receptions for 14 yards, scored a total of only 6 points. He wasn't able to get going versus the Philadelphia Eagles last week. However, going up against his 49ers defense, it should be a good one as week one, Drake was actually able to put up 14.5 points against the 49ers defense. He had 16 rushes that game for 60 yards. He had one rushing TD as well as two receptions for 5 yards and a receiving TD. Now, the 49ers overall are good defense going against opposing running backs, as over the course of the season, they're the seventh best defense against the run. However, against the Cowboys, they gave up two rushing TDs to Tony Pollard, as he was able to put up 31.2 fantasy points. It was definitely a big game for him as they were missing Ezekiel Elliott for that game. So it's definitely something to keep an eye on. Kenyon Drake is a very good back, and he's pretty productive in that offense with Cliff Kingsbury. So give him the starting spot there going against the 49ers.
Yeah, you hit it right on the money there. Like Kenyon Drake, he's a very talented back, and he just really hasn't found his game over there on his new team. So I know a lot of people spent an early second round to mid second round pick on him. So if you ended up making the finals and he's still on your squad, I think you give him the benefit of the doubt and you start him. Like the 49ers, they haven't been great, and like Anthony just said, Tony Pollard just put up 31 points against them. So I think he's a good safe start for you for your final week. But moving on to my running back start of the week, it's going to be J.K. Dobbins versus those New York Giants. So last week against Jacksonville, he had 14 rushes for 64 yards, had a rushing touchdown in there as well, had one reception for 17 yards, did have a fumble, but didn't lose it, thankfully. Scored just over 14 points with 14.6. So the Ravens are at home, which is good. And the Giants, surprisingly, have only allowed just over 100 rushing yards per game to opposing running backs with 101.8. But over their last three have slowed down a little bit with 125.3 averaged rushing yards against. So it is a risky start to start JK with Gus Edwards. Also, they're splitting the carries with him. But JK has proven himself in the past couple of weeks with 27 rushing attempts to Gus Edwards 16. So JK, he has been given a lot more opportunity than Gus and obviously Mark Ingram. And it shows by he hasn't scored under 12 fantasy points in his last 4 games played. So if you're looking for a safe flex option, I think JK is your guy.
Yeah, Dobbins is definitely a good option there to start against my New York Giants, sadly. But with Ravens, I think they're ranked number one in all rushing categories. So definitely a good option there with J.K. Dobbins. He'll get the ball a lot, and they'll want to use his fresh legs to get this offense going. And with him being a rookie and them moving into next year, they'll want to see how he does and make him the starting guy and maybe get rid of Mark Ingram for next season. But we'll move on to our wide receivers starts. For my guy, I'm going to go with Brandon Cooks of the Houston Texans going against the Cincinnati Bengals last week at Indianapolis. Brandon Cooks had 6 receptions for 59 yards, scored a total of 11.9 points. Brandon Cooks has been pretty good so far in fantasy for owners this year. And going against the Bengals, I think this is going to be his big game for week 16. Now, the Bengals have done pretty well over the last 3 weeks defending the pass. Aside from tonight's game against the Steelers, because we don't know the outcome, but going against Deshaun Watson is completely different to defend than going against a quarterback like Andy Dalton, Tua Tagovailoa, just because he's a rookie, and Daniel Jones of the New York Giants. So Brandon Cooks is easily the number one receiver of this offense and someone that Deshaun Watson definitely trusts as he leads the team in targets with 93 and he has 63 receptions. And with Will Fuller gone for the year, it just gives more volume to Cooks. So that's why I would want to start Brandon Cooks against the Cincinnati Bengals.
Yeah, like you just said there, with Will Fuller out for the season, obviously Deshaun's going to trust Brandon Cooks a lot more with that receiving production. So, especially going against the Bengals, I think he is a very good start for your final week. But moving on to my wide receiver start of the week, it's going to be Jarvis Landry against the New York Jets. Last night actually, sorry, on Sunday, he played the Giants, so he had 8 targets, 7 receptions, had 61 yards in there, plus a receiving TD, scored just over 19 points. So he's been really killing it over the past 4 weeks, putting up just over 78 points in PPR leagues. Baker continues to throw him the ball, and he's making great plays for them. And obviously, the New York Jets, they're not very good, although they did get a win last week against the Rams, their first of the season. Rams receivers did put up decent numbers with Robert Woods, 21.6 points, then Cooper Kupp putting up 8.9, which is okay, but Robert Woods is the big one there with 21.6. But the Jets are tied for second last in the league, averaging just over 2 passing touchdowns allowed per game, and then dead last in the league over the last 3 games with an average of 3 passing touchdowns per game. So I know Baker's been really slinging it lately, and he's been doing really, really well. So has obviously Jarvis Landry and Rashard Higgins over there on the Browns receiving core. But Landry has 3 receiving touchdowns over his past 4 games. So I think you ride the hot hand here, and I think Jarvis is a good start for you.
Yeah, maybe Jarvis will have a passing TD as well or something. They usually use
Yeah, you
him
never
in
know.
a bunch of different ways. So
Yeah.
maybe he'll have a passing TD or a rushing TD. So definitely a good option there to start Jarvis Landry going against the Jets. But moving on to the tight ends, I'm going to say start Logan Thomas of the Washington football team versus the Carolina Panthers. Last week versus Seattle, Logan Thomas had 13 receptions for 101 yards, scored a total of 24.1 points. And even without Alex Smith in as the starting quarterback, Logan Thomas just continues to be a reliable asset for fantasy owners that were struggling to find a tight end. Whether Alex Smith or Haskins is in the starting lineup, it's still no matter what, you want to start Logan Thomas against this Carolina Panthers defense. Carolina is ranked the 11th worst defense against opposing tight ends. And over the last 3 weeks, Logan Thomas has put up 28 receptions for 242 yards and 1 TD. I'm definitely looking for him to score an TD against this Carolina Panthers defense. I know they got pretty good safeties in the rookie Jeremy Chin. He's very good himself, but Logan Thomas is definitely just a really good starting tight end option. You can play him this week in the finals, and I guarantee you will not regret it.
Yeah, I was playing him yesterday in one of my leagues. I think it was ours actually, and I was like, "What the hell is going on? Like, is this guy not dropping the ball? Why is he putting up so many points?" But like, obviously, Seattle's defense isn't the best, but I mean, yeah, he went off. So I think against Carolina's defense, he's going to do extremely well. I know Dwayne Haskins remains the starter there. He loves throwing to him. Same thing with Terry McLaurin. So, again, if Haskins is the starter, I think Logan Thomas is a great start for your final week. But moving on to my tight end start of the week, it's going to be Noah Fant. I know we're huge Noah Fants over here on the show. They are playing the LA Chargers last week on the Thursday night game, I believe, against Buffalo. He had his best game of the season, putting up 11 targets, 8 receptions, 68 yards, plus a receiving touchdown in there. Scored 20.8 points. So, like I just said, it was his best game of the season against Buffalo. But really, Drew Lock couldn't really get a good rhythm going with his receivers. I think the first receiver was, I don't know, Tim Patrick maybe, and it was 3 minutes left in the second quarter. So really locked in, have another choice but Fant. So whoever had Fant and started him that week is obviously very good. The Chargers have allowed on average just under 2 passing touchdowns allowed per season. Sorry, per game with 1.9, making them the fourth worst. So LA also has given up the 15th most points to tight ends this season. So with the tight end position being so weak, you obviously have to make that important decision for these finals. So if you do have Fant, I think he's going to be a solid option for you, and he's going to have another big game on the road.
Yeah, the Chargers, it's always like a very close game for them. Going against any team, they don't really blow out teams, so it's definitely going to be a shootout in this one. And Noah Fant, having that big game last week versus Buffalo, this one will be pretty good. And yeah, we are definitely big fans of Noah Fant here. I feel like he's always on. You know, we're always saying something about him. So, moving on to the defense to start, I'm going to roll with Chicago at Jacksonville. Last week at Minnesota, they allowed 27 points. They got 3 sacks and 1 interception. They scored a total of 7.7 points. And over the last 3 weeks, the Bears defense has had 12 sacks and 4 turnovers. They scored a total of 17.28 points versus the Texans as well. And we know, like, the Texans, they're a very good offense with Deshaun Watson, and really blew them out of the water there in that game. But the Jacksonville Jaguars offense isn't really, very threatening with their offensive personnel that they have. James Robinson is a very good running back, but whether they keep playing Gardner Minshew or it's Mike Glennon, or Luke Fulton, I think that was his name, the other quarterback that they played. The Jaguars have given an opposing defense 6 turnovers, and on the season, the Jags have given up 37 sacks to opposing defenses. So with this Bears defense on a hot streak, with their sacks and creating turnovers, this Jacksonville Jaguars offense doesn't really look like it will be you know doing really well against this defense for Week 16.
Yeah, it's definitely a good one. I did end up playing. I don't even know. I forget who. Baltimore. They were playing Jacksonville last week, so obviously it was a good decision. I know Chicago, like you've been saying, they haven't been too hot as of late, but this is definitely a game for them to get back into that win column. They had a big win last week against Minnesota, so another win here. I know they're going to try to get it for that playoff push, but I think they're going to have a hot game against Jacksonville. So let's move on to our fantasy MVPs of the year. Anthony, do you want to take over for this one?
Yep, my fantasy football MVP of the 2020 season is running back Dalvin Cook of the Minnesota Vikings. Dalvin Cook has scored a total of 322.3 total fantasy points this year, so far. They got their game coming up next week, so we'll see how that one goes for him. But right now, 322.3 total fantasy points, scores an average of 21.48 points per game. On the season, Dalvin Cook has 297 rushes for 1,484 yards, 15 rushing TDs, as well as 42 receptions for 349 yards and 1 TD. The one position I absolutely feel like is crucial in every year in fantasy is the running back position. And people who had drafted Dalvin Cook this year got an absolute steal. Fantasy website that posted their rankings before the draft had Dalvin Cook as the number 5 running back in the league behind Christian McCaffrey, Saquon Barkley, Ezekiel Elliott, and Derrick Henry. Now, I know Derrick Henry, he is the number 1 leading rusher of the league right now, but with Dalvin Cook only missing 1 game due to injury, he's been amazing, being ranked the number 2 in rushing yards behind Derrick Henry. But what makes Dalvin Cook more valuable for my MVP vote is that he is able to make plays in the passing game, whereas Derrick Henry, he just will take the handoff and just bulldoze people, which is definitely a highlight to watch. But I know over the years, like, Dalvin Cook has sustained injuries as well, and in some, it has lowered his value overall. But he is definitely a number 1 running back that you could definitely rely on, and even ahead of these running backs that were listed ahead of him, you could definitely draft him ahead of them for next year probably, because in this Gary Kubiak offense, Dalvin Cook will be cooking all the time. So you definitely want to keep him in mind when you're looking to draft, or whether you're deciding to keep a player. You want to get Dalvin Cook on your fantasy team.
Yeah, he's looked unreal this season. I'm really happy with his production. Obviously, like you were saying, with Christian McCaffrey and Saquon Barkley, Zeke's in there. They were all above him, and look at them. Obviously, Saquon had to exit the season very early on, which really sucked to see. C-Mac obviously has played 3 games this season due to an injury. Ezekiel, he's not obviously not looking great without Dak in there. Derrick Henry's doing great. Alvin Kamara also doing really well. But yeah, Dalvin Cook, he completely runs that Vikings offense. He, like you were saying, he just bulldozes people. He can get those touchdowns whenever possible. And I was always nervous going up against teams with Cook because I knew, well, shit, like he's gonna get 2 touchdowns this game. I really hope my running backs can do just as well. But he's been doing unreal, and it's really good to see him be successful this season. And I know it's going to carry on to next season. So it's going to be very interesting to see how the draft rankings switch it up based on all of these injuries that occurred this year and just production wise. So Anthony, I think that was a very good MVP choice. But moving on to my MVP, surprise to most people, I know since I'm a Saints fan, I'm obligated to say Alvin Kamara, but I thought I'd switch it up for you. So I'm going to go with a wide receiver on the Atlanta Falcons, Calvin Ridley. So Calvin Ridley, he's been unreal this season. I know whoever was lucky enough to grab him in the 3rd or 4th round, they've been extremely happy with his production, just over 253 total fantasy points this year, averages around 19.5 points per game, has 8 receiving TDs on the year, just over 1,000 yards with 1,029, 108 targets and 67 receptions. So, like I was saying, if you told me that Calvin Ridley would be the 6th best receiver in PPR leagues at the beginning of the season behind so far Tyreek Hill, Devontae Adams, Stephon Diggs, DeAndre Hopkins, and DK Metcalf, I would have said there's literally no way because, they got Julio there, and we all know Julio's an extremely talented receiver, but obviously based on injuries, like we were saying with Dalvin's running back situation, it really helps that Ridley got a lot of production in with his absence, and it's really shown what he can do as a receiver. So he's obviously proved himself to be that number 1 receiver. In case Julio gets traded or whatever, I'm not too sure how many more years are on his deal, but Ridley only ended up missing 1 game this season due to an ankle injury, and that was in Week 9 versus the Broncos. So, like with Dalvin Cook's situation, he didn't miss too many games this season. Obviously, that was extremely important because there were so many injuries this season. But like I was saying earlier, I do have Ridley in 2 out of my 3 leagues, and I drafted him just hoping he'd be good enough to get me into the playoffs. And the first 3 weeks, he put up over 80 fantasy points. So I knew I had a very good steal, getting him 17th in one league overall and 65th in the other. So I was very, very lucky with that one. But he was projected to go around round 4 to 5. On Fantasy Pros, he was projected 46th. Again, but if that doesn't show you that he exceeded everyone's expectations, I don't know what did, because he's going to be an extremely talented receiver next season, and he's definitely going to be a solid round 2 to early round 3 pick for next season.
Yeah, Calvin Ridley was definitely a big surprise for a lot of people this year, and like you were saying with Julio Jones there, and they were bringing, Hayden Hurst. They got Todd Gurley, so it looked like they were really switching up the offense and just, um, you know, just really going towards distributing the ball overall to like everybody on the offense. But Calvin Ridley has been a huge focal point of the Atlanta Falcons offensive game, and he's definitely someone that's going to take over the reins once Julio Jones is gone. We don't know when that will happen, but could happen next year, as they're looking for a new GM and head coach. So we'll see how things play out with that. So yeah, definitely a huge win there for people that drafted Calvin Ridley. And we're coming near the end of the podcast episode, guys. So just wanted to say thank you for listening to us for this year. I know we started randomly in the middle of this season as well. It was definitely something that just came to Johnny and I to start. But we're really happy with what we've done for this season, and we're looking forward to next year as well. What we want to bring for you guys next year is definitely, going into the draft. We're going to go into like some of the rookies to look out for and what teams they could potentially be drafted to, and if they're going to be really good candidates to draft for your team for next year. And as well as, free agency as well, where guys were going to move to, if it's going to up their fantasy numbers or lower them, and, players that are on those teams, is it going to better them, or, is it going to make them kind of change the game plan for teams offensively and things like that. So we're definitely going to have a lot of fun with it. Definitely going to be having to do a lot of research as well, which will be fun as well. But we're really appreciative of you guys listening to the podcast. Johnny, do you have anything you want to say to some of our listeners?
Yeah, like you're saying, it's going to be very, very exciting once that off season hits and free agency starts up. And like you were saying, we're going to have to do a lot of research, but I'm extremely excited. I know when we started in week 7 to now, it's gone very, very quickly. So it's sad to see the season ending for fantasy, but just makes it that much more exciting for next season to start up. So again, like Anthony was saying, thank you to all of our listeners this season. We appreciate the support on, our social media pages on Twitter, on Instagram, our subscribers on YouTube. We hope to grow that throughout the off season and into next season as well. But again, just thank you. We had a lot of fun with this, and we're excited to continue for next season.
Yeah, so definitely give us a follow on Twitter and on Instagram. It's at FF in the six. We're definitely happy to give you guys any advice for fantasy and moving forward. If you guys need it, definitely reach out. We'll tweet back at you. We'll definitely send you a message back if you hit us up on Instagram, and give us a follow on you know Spotify as well. Subscribe to the channel and subscribe on YouTube as well. We'll definitely be putting out some good content in the off season, so definitely want to hit us up for that. Thank you all for listening. Take care and good luck in fantasy finals.